This all happened so recently, I'm still shaken up. I can barely write about it now without my nerves acting up. A few weeks ago, my mom, sister, and I went to Colorado for an entire week of vacation. We were going to drive all over the state, visit the national parks, and go horseback riding and whitewater rafting, and so much more. I was excited, and I sorely needed a break from work anyway. We drove a grueling 16 hours out there and spent our first day rafting down the rivers. After an extremely wet but exhilarating day, we drove to a ranch house to get horseback riding. We arrived at sunset, so it was too late to do anything, but we had all the next day to ride the trails and see the sights. The ranch was dumpy, to put it nicely. It was all ran down with scraps of steel everywhere, and the shoddy lodging cabins were in desperate need for repair. My sister and I checked the place for spiders and bugs before we even thought of bringing our luggage inside. It was only for the night, I reassured myself. Just one night in a dumpy shack on a rock-hard bed that probably had bedbugs under the sheets. My mom tried to cheer us up, and she had bought skewers and a pack of hot dogs to roast over the communal fire pit. Happy to get out of the shack, my sister and I made a nice cozy fire, and soon a few other visitors came out to sit around the fire and roast s'mores and share stories. We talked about where we were from and where we were going, and all our adventures along the way. Eventually the stories turned into tall tales and urban legends, and the sort of stuff you'd usually tell around a bonfire. That's when I spoke up. I loved stories, especially scary ones, and hey, we're out west, we're in Native American territory, why not liven the place up with my favorite local myth, the legend of the Skinwalkers? Now for the uninitiated, Skinwalkers are very evil and very dangerous beings. They were humans who gained the ability to take on the form of an animal by wearing its pelt, usually through very dark and taboo magic. I knew all this and told my story. Who doesn't love a good ghost story after all? Everyone seemed to be enjoying it, and I admit I took some creative liberties and really just retold an old werewolf story, but with a skinwalker as the monster instead. I improvised a lot of the story and added a few things that weren't in the mythos at all. I gave our beloved skinwalker wide crazed eyes with pinpoints for pupils with a matching insane smile. I made the skinwalker horribly misshapen, swollen joints and arms that were too long and legs that were too short and a head that never sat straight on its shoulders. I made it as terrifying as I could imagine. No one minded, and they actually really liked it. A man from Kentucky admitted the visuals alone were enough to creep him out. Victory in my book, if you ask me, and once I was done, everyone decided it was getting really late. Our firewood was dwindling, and it was as good a time as any to turn in for the night. We packed up our skewers and s'mores and doused the fire and headed to our little shacks. I tossed and turned a lot trying to fall asleep. I couldn't get comfortable on that damn bed. A rock was probably cozier than that mattress, so against my better judgment, I got out of bed and walked about the cabin. I reasoned that if I stayed up late enough, I would be so tired that I would fall asleep no matter what I was laying on. I think I briefly contemplated sleeping on the floor, and I wasn't that desperate yet. It was pitch black outside, no lights from any nearby street lamps, no car headlights, and hell, not even the cabin lights were on. I don't remember seeing a single star as well. It was a bit creepy, but I shrugged off the shiver creeping upon my back as simply the cold tile floor beneath my feet. I stepped outside in my flimsy foam flip-flops to get a better look, and I could barely make out the ranch, and for some stupid reason I decided to go walking around. Eventually my eyes adjusted where I could see well enough to navigate. I paced up and down the road where the cabin sat and then circled around to the fenced-in field where the horses were out grazing. Except there weren't any horses, probably in the stables for the night, I reasoned. I shivered again, and it was getting cold. I turned around to head back to my own cabin, and it was stupid of me to be out all alone at an obscene hour, I had realized. I needed to get to bed, but when I turned, there was something in the middle of the road. Its shape was swallowed up by the surrounding darkness, and I could barely make it out. But whatever it was tall and thin. I shrugged it off as just a pole or something else and kept walking, but then it started moving. I froze and my breath caught in my throat and I could barely breathe. My eyes began to focus on the impossibly dark figure standing against a barely visible sleet gray night. Now I could see it, and it was a person, but like nothing I had ever seen before. Its arms were impossibly long and its legs impossibly short. It had a torso far too long for its real thin body and a head much too big for its pencil-thin neck. It didn't move anymore and it just stood there, twitching, arms jerking up and down and head lolling around its shoulder. I still stood there like the dumb F I was. My cabin was a few hundred yards behind that thing, and I wasn't so stupid as to try to walk past it. My only option was to go around and hope it didn't see me. I was about to go around behind cabins, but when I started looking back, it was gone. I then went to my own cabin and I told my mom everything. I don't think she believed me, but she didn't push it. The next day, we said goodbye to our ranches and to our companions, and I noticed the man from Kentucky who said he had enjoyed my story. He told me again how much he liked it, said he was going to tell it to his own kids when he got home. My name is Michael. I own a dairy farm in the Great Plains near a Navajo reservation along with my brother. The farm was built by our parents before we were born and it was passed down to us after their death. It's a pretty big farm. It has 2 barns, a well, and a house. I've always dreaded this place because it's the place where our parents died, or at least where they were found. My parents died when we were both 19 and their bodies were found mutilated in the well. There was nothing stolen or destroyed. If not for the blood trail leading to the well, we would have never found them. The case was passed as a murder, but they never had any suspects, and me and my brother were too ravaged by the event to think about it. Years passed and we forgot about the event. Well, until 2 weeks ago. We were gathering food for the cows using an old tractor, and it was pretty dark, but we didn't use its headlights because the battery was too old and couldn't stand them being on for very long. As I was loading up the food, I heard my mom's voice calling for me from behind some bushes. "Michael, it's been too long. Come to me." But it sounded weird, as if it was spoken through an old radio. I was terrified and I looked at my brother and he was as white as snow. I whispered to him to turn on the headlights in the direction of the voice. What laid before our eyes made my knees weak. It was a coyote, but its eyes were pitch black and it was standing on its back legs. I jumped in the tractor and we noped our way out there as fast as we could. We arrived at the house and locked the door straight away. That's the moment when I passed out and I woke up in the middle of the night. I thought all that just happened was a dream, but then I saw my brother telling me to stay quiet and pointing his shotgun at the door. Then I heard it again. "Michael, come here, my dear." Then it started to knock softly on the door. The knocking turned into banging, and then my brother started looking through the window at that thing. When it realized we were looking at it, it let out the most horrific screech I've ever heard before it ran off. An hour later it started again, the voice and the knocking. I started searching it up on the internet and I learned they are called Skinwalkers, evil Navajo men that sold their soul. Calling their names supposedly attracts them, and I hope writing it doesn't trigger them. My brother wants to go outside and face it, and I'm afraid we won't see the light of day again. Please help us.